We are so thankful that you made time for the product and health tech community today.
Those moments where you are kind of realizing that it's making a difference, that this might be the thing that moves the needle for a lot of people.
We all need to be able to understand what are some of the features and what are some of the specific logistics that are related to developing products in healthcare so that they are as user-friendly and as clinically useful as they can be.
You got to get close to the end user. Healthcare has a lot of room for innovation and improvement. Take the time to understand first, build second.
With those kind of challenges, you have to be innovative about the way you're going to do your work.
Changing our mindset from being right at all costs to actually, the quicker you realize you're wrong, the better.
I am just so proud of the patients that we serve, the mission behind it, and the scientific rigor that we are committed to, and it drives me every single day.
Welcome everybody to Product and Health Tech Go Beyond 2022. I am your host today, Nicole Harris-Roberts, Director of Product Marketing with Vinyl. We are so glad you're joining us today. We are live today in a studio in Los Angeles, and this is our third Product and Health Tech event. We are really eager to bring you this content today. We have a great show. First up, we have a panel that's all about innovation. We have a presentation about behavioral health. If you remember our October event last year, we had some great panelists, and we have a new one today, which will also preview some of our podcast content. And we have more in store for you, which we'll cover in a minute. But let me start by just saying welcome. We're glad you're here. We are glad you are part of the Product and Health Tech community. If you haven't already subscribed to be an official member, please go to our website, productandhealthtech.com/events. Navigate to the bottom of the page, and you will see a sign up now link. Go ahead and tap that link. If you're not already on our mailing list, you can click that link and get on the list to receive announcements, news, when we have calls for speakers for future presentations, and most importantly for today, you can get access to our Slack community. Our Slack community is more than 100 members strong, and we have many people who are ready in the live stream chat and Slack at this moment. But if you haven't joined the community, you'll have to go ahead and get a link to by signing up through the website. So if you haven't already, go ahead and sign up for our Slack community from productandhealthtech.com. So first up, we have a presentation that's all about innovation, featuring a couple of speakers, and in fact, one of them I know is in the Slack community as of this morning, so maybe we'll catch her this afternoon and you can live chat with her. Molly Zimmer from St. Luke's Health System. We also have Vanessa Rocknick from Novo Nordisk. Both of them have different perspectives from two very different organizations, and they are joined in conversation with their moderator, Chris Hoyd, Director of Product at Vinyl. Before we cut to that program, just wanted to cover a couple of announcements. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button. It helps us out because when we have more subscribers, we can unlock new features and bring you more exciting content. Also, if you haven't already checked out the content from our other events, you can find it on our YouTube channel. And this live stream will be available following the program, just like the other live streams we have. If you missed our June presentation, if you missed our October presentation from last year, you can go ahead to Product and Health Tech's YouTube channel and check out that content as well. We also have a podcast, folks. So we have the Product and Health Tech podcast. It's currently available through Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts. If you haven't subscribed to that already, you're going to want to check that out. And in fact, many of the sessions, all of the sessions today, will be available on the podcast. And you may even be surprised by some of the content there. We have some surprises that we didn't have time to show today, but that are included in the full version of the podcast episode. So more to come in a little bit. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Hoyd, our moderator, who will be talking about product innovation in mega healthcare. Let's take a look.
Vanessa and Molly, thank you so much for being with us today in the product and health tech community. I know both of you are responsible for leading some really cool initiatives at your respective employers. Really excited to kind of dive into that today, what you're up to, and maybe draw some similarities and differences between the two innovation programs. But maybe we can just start with a little bit of background on each of you and go from there. So maybe we'll start with you, Vanessa.
So I'm Vanessa Ropnik. I work for Novo Nordisk, which is a Danish-based global pharmaceutical company. And I'm currently based here in the US on the East Coast, and I work for a team called Digital Transformation and Innovation. So we're actually one of the first sort of internal innovation incubators within Novo Nordisk, and I can't wait to share more with you about that later.
Hi, I'm Molly Zimmer. I work for St. Luke's Health System in Boise, Idaho. We're a regional healthcare system, and we've got about around 16,000 employees, so pretty big. And one of the things that I am working on currently is leading and building an innovation center of excellence at St. Luke's. And so we're really working on building a common language and tools and processes to facilitate innovation internally and eventually externally as well.
It sounds like you're both kind of leading ambitious, quite broad new programs, trying to kind of spearhead them at companies that maybe have been around for a while and maybe are, not necessarily used to working in some of the ways that you're trying to introduce in your new program. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about those programs and what you're trying to bring, more specifically to your companies. And so, Vanessa, I'm curious, within the context of a large pharmaceutical company, how have you structured this innovation program? What are the goals of it? What's kind of the day-to-day of it like at this point?
So back in 2019, the ET at Novo Nordisk actually did an analysis where they really understood that they needed to think about and approach innovation in a different way. So what they did was they put together what we call APIS Labs, which is in essence an internal innovation framework. It uses a combined methodology of lean design thinking and agile project management elements. And it's been tailored specifically for the US office to serve the customers, whoever they may be within the US healthcare ecosystem. So the idea was one that it would bring us back to the customer. So that's another key thing to take away here, that we wanted to really make sure that we're focusing on their pain points and not our own as a business. So when you think about that, it's, obviously a pain point for the business can be adherence or persistence. They need people to be more adherent and persistent with the products, for their health benefits as well. And, but then from a patient's perspective, they don't even want to be taking the products. They want to be healthy. So you have to sort of think of it from their perspective. So customer centricity is a big one, just thinking about and approaching things in a different way, and generally trying to change the culture within the company was another key theme that was given to us in terms of, as I've mentioned, embracing the fear of failure, because 90% of innovation is probably going to fail. Embracing resistance, because if you didn't have resistance, then you're probably not innovating, because people love things to stay the same. And then being uncomfortable, I think, with being uncomfortable just because of the nature of change. I think, like I mentioned, we all tend to want things to stay the same. So just embracing those kind of things that don't automatically come naturally to us as humans.
Very cool. And one of the more, I think, ambitious undertakings, especially in healthcare, is to bring that kind of thinking to a large established organization. I think it's really kind of admirable to spearhead that. So, Molly, I'm curious if you can say a little bit about what you're up to as well.
Yeah, so a lot of what you were saying really resonates, especially thinking about like the culture component and the fear of failure. As anyone could imagine, a health system, like we have a very low tolerance for failure. That's not a good thing when you're thinking about, a hospital stay or something like that. So one of the things, so my boss, Reed Steffen, our CIO, He likes to call it learning fast instead of failing fast. Although I think it's kind of good to destigmatize failure too. So I like both phrases. But as far as the culture is concerned, we're really working on a lot of the same thing, like really changing our mindset from being right at all costs to like, actually, the quicker you realize you're wrong, the better, and you have better outcomes and you save money and time and resources and all of those things. But it's a significant effort in a large organization. So far, the program that I'm working on, it's called the Innovation Center of Excellence. It's really new. I started working on it formally about a year ago and reporting to our CIO. And since then, we've had a proof of concept, and now we're right in the middle of a pilot for our accelerator program, an internal accelerator program. We're really just working to slowly introduce this concept, but it really is resonating with people. Having a system and an actual steps to innovation, to problem solving, and to breaking away from our constraints and being able to come up with creative solutions, identify the assumptions in those solutions, and then test them. It's really, really resonating so far. So right now we're working with about a dozen different teams and work groups within our organization on existing internal problems and really just applying that kind of scientific method of innovation to really get clear on what we need to test to make sure that we have the best outcomes possible.
And I think that is one interesting maybe point of contrast between the two is at Novo Nordisk, it sounds like sort of executive buy-in early, agreement about kind of what the general tenets of the program might be and what the long-term goals might be. Molly, like you said, grassroots, that's a different ballgame, right? Can you maybe, if you're able to talk about it, can you go a little bit more into the pilot, how you kind of got people bought in and participating, and what success looks like if the pilot goes well?
Yeah. And I was thinking the same thing, Chris, when Vanessa was talking. I was like, ooh, we're not quite ready. I mean, we'll get there, but we're not quite ready to get crazy, with our innovation strategy, especially like with investment in particular. I think we'll get there. But right now, what we're doing is actually pretty revolutionary for our health system. So the accelerator in particular has been one of my favorite things that we've been involved in so far. So this pilot is basically we took our proof of concept, which was, oh my gosh, it lasted about 6 months. And we had executives nominate teams essentially to work on a variety of different challenges that they had identified internally. And then we took them through our whole innovation process from challenge creation. We use the strategizer tools, so business model canvas, value propositions, things like that. So we took them through the whole process and had a big fun Shark Tank event at the end. And that was great. But we were like, that took way too long. How do we, time box this? So our accelerator is a 16-week, and I think we might even be able to get it down to 12 weeks. We'll see. But it's a 16-week program to take people basically through the whole innovation process, beginning with a challenge and ending with basically, it's kind of a pitch. The word pitch is a little bit loaded, but a presentation, a recommendation that they'll give to executives about how they think, based on all of their testing, customer interviews, all of that great analysis, what they think the best possible solution is to a particular problem. So what we're working on, it's not necessarily super sexy, but it's really, really important. We're actually working on commuting. Initially, we were looking at it from a sustainability standpoint because sustainability is it's a top 3 initiative for St. Luke's, but it's just important, everywhere. What we found though was when it comes to commuting, sustainability is great. And if you ask people, they'll think about it, but they don't factor it in necessarily. They just have to get to work, right? It's low on their list of things that they're thinking about when they have to get to work. So we very quickly pivoted and we started looking at not just sustainability, but what are some really efficient, cost-saving ways for employees to get to work. And in particular, the customer segment that we care about right now is those frontline staff So like our laundry, our cleaning folks, our food nutrition folks, even like all of our frontline clinical staff who have to get to work. They can't be remote like we are right now. They have to actually get there. And we don't have very many good options for transportation. So that's our challenge. We've been through at this point, I think we've been through 9 different tests. So those tests can be anything from user interviews, surveys, things like buy a feature, card sorting, like all those. And we test something, we learn from it. We have a big progress board in our innovation center, and we, move our validations over, and then we kill some things. And so, I mean, I could go on, but in a nutshell, I think success has already happened because we've gotten way further just in, I think we're closing in on 8 weeks. We've gotten so much further with this group than we did with our POC in the way that we've structured everything. And success in my mind would look like we have a really fully tested recommendation that we can give to those executives that will positively impact, thousands of folks in our workforce who currently really struggle with getting to work in an efficient, convenient, and cost-effective way.
That was really cool. Okay, so to recap, early days of the St. Luke's Innovation Program, you're in a pilot phase. You've kind of crowdsourced some sort of internal, sounds like kind of operational problems. So you found a lot of issues that people within the halls of St. Luke's really care about and would make things a lot better for them. It sounds like, you mentioned earlier that a longer term success might be, getting to a place where you're kind of connected with the entrepreneurial ecosystem, maybe even investing or partnering with some health tech companies. So that's such a cool, place to start, kind of build that grassroots energy and enthusiasm for that, that mature version of it's pretty different, right? But the way to get there.
But one thing to really connect what you just said, Chris, to what we're doing, in my mind, the work we're doing now is really empowering internally, and it's really healthy for our culture, and especially giving like individual contributors and non-people leaders opportunities to engage in meaningful work and problem solving. That's awesome. But it also allows us to lay the foundation that we can do exactly what you just said, that we can actually, invest and co-create, whether it's, a doctor, which there are several actually that have come out of the woodwork, who we'd love to engage with on ideas that they have from early on. And so I think what we're doing now is really getting our reps in terms of being able to actually really help an entrepreneur from the ground up and help them work through their process and co-create something in the future.
Very cool. So Vanessa, now you mentioned the APIS Labs framework earlier, which I'm somewhat familiar with at this point. Can you maybe describe that at a high level, and maybe we can pick apart some ways that's sort of different than what Molly's up to?
We actually have what we call an experiment team, which consists of what you would know as a product owner in Agile, product owner, Scrum Master, as well as a build team. So the idea is that the product owner and the Scrum Master are internal to the business and are able to be those sort of those people that retain all the knowledge that they're learning throughout the experimentation in the lab. And then we also leverage a build team, as I mentioned, which is usually external vendors who are able to help us by providing additional capacity or additional skill sets that we just don't currently have within the business. The way we work is in what you call sprints, again, using the Agile sort of framework methodology or a terminology here. We have a number of meetings and standing ceremonies within those sprints, and that's just a fancy way of saying meetings. But essentially, the idea is that we create this environment where these small Agile teams are basically isolated and allowed to explore and experiment within a particular area. So within the framework, we actually work across a number of different phases. We actually start, as I mentioned before, with the customer problem, the sort of pain point that we're trying to solve. Then we move on to the next phase, which is we think we know what the customer problem is. Let's test that out a little bit more, then come up with a hypothesis for how we think we can solve that problem. So it's not even till the third phase that we actually start thinking about the solution, which I think is another key takeaway from how our team works. We don't start with the shiny object trying to run around to find the problem that it needs to solve. We really want to start with the customer problem. So again, that customer centricity, and truly understand what their problem is. So we spend about, I would say, anywhere between 50 to 75% just up front, really trying to immerse ourselves into that patient world. And then we move into the ideation phase, like I mentioned, come up with some of those solutions that we believe can solve for the problem, and then move into the final phase, which we call test and learn, which is, again, just trying to iterate and experiment on the solutions that we've identified and see which one best solves for the problem that we originally identified. Having said that, that's assuming everything goes to plan. It's definitely not linear, and it definitely doesn't mean every single opportunity that we start with goes through to test and learn. I mean, Molly mentioned it before, it's failing fast. It's not wasting resources, it's not wasting time. It's about finding the best outcome for your customers. Another thing to clarify is that we do work with the 3 lenses of innovation in mind. So that's not unique to Novo Nordisk. It's been used, I think, at a number of different places where you think about what's desirable for the customer, what's feasible, and then also what is viable to the business. So we're constantly checking ourselves against those 3 lenses to make sure that, is there a real problem in the market? Is there desire for change? Because we all know someone that likes to complain about something but will never make the change. So, is it feasible to build this? Does it make sense for our company to play in this space? Or, is the technology even possible right now?
I'm curious if some of the similarities are sort of in the challenges or the headwinds category, even though the companies themselves are pretty different. Molly, maybe can you talk us through some of the friction, some of the challenges, some of the, what's been difficult so far to get to where you are? Oh,
yeah. Yeah. And first I just have to say, Vanessa, I was just like nodding furiously to everything you said, because it's just, you're just speaking my language. I think, just testing assumptions. If there's one thing that we could get everybody to do, that would be it. So with this kind of grassroots, or sometimes we like to call it, Lexi and I call it guerrilla warfare approach that we have, but no real casualties, I promise. Honestly, we've been able to just really think about the best way we want to build the program without a lot of report back on what you're doing. So that freedom is really amazing. The challenge, though, to that is there isn't, our CEO isn't, giving his all hands meetings. He's not telling everyone about the innovation center. And so the way that we had to kind of start spreading the word and build trust was really, really getting to know everyone in the organization, especially folks who were leading maybe similar efforts. A lot of times folks get, performance improvement or continuous improvement. They're like, well, how is this any different than that? And it is really different because it's really reimagining this whole solution. It's not just finding the pain points and making them a little bit better. But we spent a ton of time in discovery mode, reaching out to leaders, reaching out to other departments like performance improvement, continuous improvement that are within our kind of improvement ecosystem, folks that are just trying to fix problems essentially in a variety of ways. So I would say the biggest barrier for us has just been building trust. It's been building the understanding of what our definition of innovation is and where we're headed. But then it's also been getting people to not feel protective or threatened. We're not coming for anyone's stuff. but to start seeing us as a resource and actually like extra hands to help them view their problems, their current challenges a little bit differently. So I'd say that's been our biggest barrier, and we've had great success, although it has taken time. But we've had great success in building those allies and finding those partners who can help us basically get some quick success stories, and then word of mouth. I mean, it travels fast. So
that's interesting. You mentioned other departments maybe thinking that what you do could be somewhat similar. And at least in my experience, I found that comes down to something you mentioned earlier, which was sort of like evangelizing the vocabulary of innovation, like helping them really internalize that these, this sort of like lexicon of words and innovation, like these are terms of art, and they really do mean something quite different than what it might mean in someone else's sort of operational day to day. Now, Vanessa, on the Novo Nordisk side, we kind of established to some extent executive buy-in here, maybe to a greater extent than where Molly's at, focused on potential new sort of business ideas or new revenue ideas rather than solving for kind of operational issues. So I'd imagine a different set of challenges. Can you talk us through some of what you've worked through?
I was almost going to say, I don't think I need to add anything here. We've absolutely suffered, resourcing issues, whether that be people or money. The good thing about that, and I think the good thing that it's people like us that are in these roles, is with those kind of challenges, you have to be innovative about the way you're going to do your work. Do I wish that my innovation or the team's innovation could be focused more on solving the actual customer problems? Yes, but if we have to come against these kind of limitations, that's only going to build our sort of innovation muscles more so. So that's that challenge. We also face, I think it relates a lot to what I've mentioned before in terms of that fear of failure, that resistance that you get. One of the things that we knew we were going to get because of the long, successful history that Novo Nordisk has had, we knew that we were going to get some kind of resistance, because if it's been working well, why do we need to change it? And so instead of waiting for that resistance to come to us, we went out and sought it out, and we continue to do so. So whenever we feel people pushing back or maybe sort of putting their guard up, then that's when we hone in on that person and try to figure out what's actually going on and how we can maybe pivot their point of view for what we're doing and get their support. We also, I think a great example that I can give for that is with our internal subject matter experts across those areas of the business that everyone thinks is anti-innovation, like regulatory, privacy, legal, all those fun ones. And I actually think they are fun, because I have a pretty good time with these guys at some of the catch-ups that we have. And but we actually bring to them proactively the activities that we're working on, and you would know this probably more than anyone, Chris, being involved in that, we bring it to them, we keep them engaged, let them know what we're doing, and then they feel like they're a part of the process, and they're able to guide us on what we can and maybe can't do, or should just think of a different way to approach. And so that's always good to be proactive and get their buy-in. So that's one example that I can give about embracing resistance.
Yeah, I think the anti-territoriality stance is so important, and I think it's sort of a byproduct maybe of what I think is some of the most important kind of upside of this kind of work, which is I think it really makes some companies better places to work. I think it just makes it more interesting. It gets you closer to the customer, right, and solving their actual problems. So thank you both for joining us. I really enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoy talking about this stuff with you, and I think it's super important for this community to hear. So thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Nicole Harris-Roberts, Director of Product Marketing at Vinyl. And in the studio here, I have Ian Harris, President and CEO of Vinyl. Welcome.
How are you?
Wonderful. It's an exciting day.
It is.
And the presentation we just heard, there's a lot to cover, guys. I hope you are in the Slack channel chatting with all of us. I know Molly Zimmer was just there. Ask her anything. Molly, sorry, not sorry. Go in Slack and start the conversation. But I wanted to start the conversation with you with a brief question, which is, we heard a lot from them about the differences of building innovation within a large organization, sort of from a top-down perspective, versus the more grassroots, people who maybe are working in a care team and they just see something that needs to be fixed and they take it upon themselves to do it, right?
Yeah.
What was your reaction to that?
I made some notes here as I was watching, and first of all, let me say the content you guys are putting together here is really, really great. I'm really impressed with the quality of these events and the podcast and the other videos that are coming out. But I did take some notes, and the way I was thinking about that here in my notes is, there's a big difference between the way big or established companies think about innovation and innovation programs and what's necessary, and sort of startups, right? And I think that's because, if you ask a startup founder, if you say, hey, have you thought about who's your head of innovation, right? Or how are you thinking about launching an innovation program? They'll look at you like, what are you talking about? That's me, right? Our whole company is about innovation. But that's because in a startup, usually, they're really focused on innovating about, sort of one thing, right? Usually, it's like one big issue or one big opportunity that they're looking to change the way things are done. Whereas at a big company, right, you have, by sort of definition, many more stakeholders. Sometimes you have many more different types of products, right? You have many more systems. You have so much more that you have to get through. And a lot of times that's because they have innovated in some major way already, right? And they have products or services or offerings that are really, really successful and doing a really good job. And sometimes you'll see headwinds or other things because, people are used to doing things the way they're doing them, and, they're used to them working a certain way. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's very, very important, particularly at a legacy company, a big company, that, when you're launching a kind of innovation program, that you find those people in the grassroots who are thinking about how can we do things differently, right? How can we do things with a new, fresh approach? But also that you're giving it your sort of blessing, right? And that the leaders at those companies are letting everybody know that this is important, for the company to do. And I think we heard them talking about that a little bit during this piece of content.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many different ways you can go about it. I loved what Molly said about failing fast or learning fast, right? That's kind of the name of the game when it comes to innovation.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention one thing to the product and health tech community briefly, which is that we are going to be at the Health Conference in Las Vegas, November 13th, 2022. And we hope that those of you who are going to the Health Conference will come and find us at Product and Health Tech. And we'll share some details with you in some emails and later on. But wanted to make sure you knew that we were there. And we hope to speak with many of you in person. And it's going to be a new one for us, right? We started Product and Health Tech during the pandemic when it was all virtual. And we're so happy to be getting back to this world where, in a safe way, we can network again with each other. Speaking of networking, for those of you who haven't signed up to our Slack community or sign up on our mailing list, you're going to want to go ahead and do that, because for those of you who register for this event, we have a special Zoom link that we sent out only to those who registered to join us at 4:45 Pacific today for live networking. So do tune in for that, and we hope to see most of you there. Our next segment is featuring Sonia Garcia. She is the Chief Product Officer and co-founder of AmaiHealth. And Sonia I had a lovely conversation with her a couple of weeks ago. We actually created a podcast episode with her, which is available through our podcasts through Apple and Spotify. But just want to give you a fair warning. Today's conversation does contain content related to self-harm. And if you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available by calling or texting 988 or chatting at 988lifeline.org. Let's get into our conversation with Sonia Garcia of AmaiHealth.
For those who don't know, tell us a little bit about your background and why you decided to co-found this particular company.
Definitely. I'll start with the very beginning of my background. My family is originally from Mexico and Puerto Rico, and I grew up in South Texas. And it's largely
For those who don't know, tell us a little bit about your background and why you decided to co-found this particular company.
Definitely. I'll start with the very beginning of my background. My family is originally from Mexico and Puerto Rico, and I grew up in South Texas. And it's largely Hispanic down there, really great town known as McAllen. But when I was 16, I tragically lost my dad to suicide. And it's always hard to say, frankly, but it completely disrupted our family life. It disrupted our community. It was a really difficult thing to go through. I'm the oldest of 5. So it was my mom, myself, me, and my 4 siblings trying to battle and figure out how to properly move on, what to do. We didn't really know about therapy. We didn't know about support or resources or grievance counselors. We didn't really have knowledge over how to seek help, much less from who or where. And so we went at it alone, and it was a very difficult process, to the extent that one of my siblings, my brother in particular, I think took it really hard. And ultimately, he ended up going through his own battles with mental illness. And schizoaffective disorder was what he was ultimately diagnosed. And, within the family, we at that time understood now what the worst case scenario would be if we did not get him the right treatment in time. And so it was quite a scramble, and also this really big determination, coupled with unfortunate frustration to just get help. And so we went through several cycles of trying to access health systems, psychiatric hospitals, different, community health centers and things, and just being met time and time again with really long wait lists or not a good fit or really costly and prohibitive, factors that ultimately weren't, getting him through the doors. If I'm completely honest, we ultimately did not get the right care for him until we went back to Mexico. That was something that after the 4th or 5th hospitalization, we just said, this is enough. Nothing is changing. It's only getting worse. We're not finding the right level of resources here. And I found a clinic in Monterrey, Mexico. And that's where he got better and got stable and started returning to a little bit of normalcy. I'm super happy and proud to share that he just graduated with the master's in mechanical engineering this year.
Wow,
he had a
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's huge, right? Like
that is huge.
To see just him battling and suffering and struggling to now he's thriving. He's living in Austin, Texas, and he's getting back on his feet and is wanting to work as an engineer and obtained a master's from UT RGV. And so I couldn't be more proud, and I couldn't be more grateful that, the treatment ultimately worked. And it was a holistic type of model where the family was incorporated, culturally competent care was being delivered.
Yes.
He was able to exercise. There was a nutrition plan. There was so many different aspects of his treatment that were all working in tandem and working together to get him better. And it worked, right? It was incredible. And so, as a caregiver to him, that was something that I got to witness, front row, front and center. And began understanding, oh my goodness, when you integrate these components together, look at these shifts. When you first establish, a healthy sleeping pattern, that begins to form a foundation. Then you can add on, better eating. Then let's make sure that there's an exercise regimen applied. Then, yes, let's check on the medication and how well he's adhering and how well that's working. But there are so many other factors and elements that play into this, and especially him being connected with family. We have a lot of family still in Mexico. And so it all came together in this really great, incredible way that resulted in good change, resulted in good outcomes, resulted in him getting better. And that was absolutely one of the pinnacle moments where I said, I have to just dedicate my life to this.
First of all, thank you for sharing your experience. These are not easy subjects to handle. They're not easy subjects to hear about. But when you start to share your story, you realize that there are more and more people out there who need to hear that. Well, number one, they're not alone. There are resources that are available nationally and locally, but more importantly, your experience you have a professional experience where you're in this consulting firm and you're working with the big executives and they're thinking very high level about how do we serve large populations, right? And then you think about your brother and bringing that to the heart, right? My next question is going to be all around empathy, and you're right there. I mean, I think it's very hard to do what you do without empathy. So can you speak to what, in your view, is kind of empathy? What is empathy's role in product development and product management?
Such a good question. And one that definitely fuels everything I do. I'll just provide some background. Following consulting, I went to Stanford to do a master's program in engineering design impact within the School of Design. And I got to do a master's thesis focused on mental health innovation. And in there, within the design school, is where they have the school of thought and a lot of discipline applied to user-centered design, empathy-driven design. And so I had learned and studied a lot about this. I had lived it, but then I got formal training, formal studies from Stanford within this, and just uncovered how it doesn't, you don't have to have gone through what we went through as a family. It doesn't have to be at that end of the spectrum. You can definitely imbue empathy in many different ways, shapes, and forms as you're building, as you're designing, as you are creating something. And it starts with understanding who your end user is, which is a hairier problem than you expect. And, you talk
all
about
those user experience researchers who are listening, we see you.
We see you. It's really tough because people are so dynamic, and you can think about one super user or one ideal optimal user, and then think about other areas in which others could benefit and other profile types and personas, and you start crafting and creating, and you can mock up so many different styles across this of who's using this and how and what is their lifestyle like, but you don't get close to the reality until you're up front and center and actually seeing these users in their day-to-day lives or getting FaceTime with them, and being as close as you can to understanding their needs, their pain points, what they're currently doing, their workarounds, right? If there are no solutions in place. And that just begets so much empathy because you're in their world for a day, an hour, whether that's through, an empathy interview, or you're on the ground doing observational interviews, or you're lived it yourself, and you are some of those end users, or like adjacent to the end user. And you just begin to foster so much empathy, which is so different from sympathy.
Seeking that genuine understanding. Isn't that what, great product pros want to do, particularly in health tech? I'd love to hear more about your process for kind of bringing in that voice of the customer or ideal user throughout your product development life cycle. So how once you, you're such a wonderful ambassador for people who are, suffering from mental illness, but also to be a caregiver. How do you incorporate those learnings into your product development process?
A lot of it has to just do with getting out there and listening and getting the people that have been through this to dictate some of their journeys and just openly trust and weigh in on what they've done and what they've gone through. When I started this work, and this has been many years building, right? And a lot of people reached out at the beginning because of what we went through as a family to say, hey, we've gone through that as well. Or what have you done? What resources can you point me to? Throughout my brother's journey as well, they said, hey, I also have a loved one. I'd like to understand how you're getting him help, how you're getting treatment. And now the closer I've gotten into this work, and now within MI, a lot of people are saying, hey, I myself have gone through this, or I know a loved one who has. Can I put you in touch? Can they share what their journey has been? And every time I get that opportunity, absolutely, it doesn't matter what phase of work we're in or what stage of the company we're at. It is so important to continuously be intaking some of those perspectives and specific journeys. And so what happens is then I'll reach out With COVID, it was a little bit difficult. If I can do this in person, I think that's absolutely the best thing you can do, to sit face to face with someone, look them in the eye, tell them, it's okay. This is a safe space for you to share what you've gone through. But otherwise, we'll book a Zoom, right, at least a video conference, set a time, and then I'll just listen, and I'll put up maybe a Figma board or a digital whiteboard to say, do you want to map out like how this experience has been for you? What are the different components? Help me understand where it was the hardest. Help me understand where you were lost and frustrated. What really broke you? How did you feel, toward the clinical setting, toward your family, toward those you were responsible for? And it is this opening conversation where you're so let into their world and their perspective on what's taken place in their life. And, you literally lifting all the covers up to say, wow, it's not just, I went into a clinic, took some medication, came out. It is so many of the details of how I felt, whether I had a sense of control or not, how I was treated in the small exchanges, who was I accompanied within the patient room? Did I go through an intensive, outpatient experience, or was it a partial hospitalization? And where did I end up after that? What happened when I left? Who was there for me? Like, did you adhere to treatment or not? And so to get these conversations, it unlocks your worldview and gets you so deep into what the individual experience is. And I do this a lot from the patient side, right? From those who have gone through the system, but it's also equally important to understand it from the clinical lens. And so we've brought together a really great team of advisors. We have a great CMO, Dr. Scott Fears, as well as a medical director of behavioral health, Dr. Gary Tsai. And their experience in clinical settings and in trying to imbue in integrated, whole person care, or multidisciplinary, compassionate, comprehensive wraparound services, substance abuse disorder care and treatment. And so you need to learn about that too, because there's so many intricacies that they've amassed throughout the years of their expertise and of being with hundreds of patients trying to do this and trying to get them to adhere to treatment, trying to get them to get to a behavior change. And so I think it's also important that you weigh not just the patient experience, but you also understand the other side of that coin, which is what happens in the system, what happens in clinical settings. And so from our advisors, from the medical director, CMO, right, that's who we also source a lot of that input from as we design and build.
Can you speak a little bit about culturally competent care here? For example, the experience that your brother had in Monterrey versus in the United States. And he thrived in Mexico. So tell me, what was different, you think, about his care experience in Mexico versus the care experience in the United States? I mean, there are lots of differences, right? But in terms of being him being seen and understood.
Yeah. And this is my opinion and my take, right? But I feel that the US is quite individualistic. It's kind of every man for himself and individual achievement and accomplishment. And, at 18, you're fly out of the nest and you need to be independent and you need to be on your own. In Hispanic culture and where we come from, family is so important. Your grandmother lives with you as she gets older. You care for the most vulnerable. You have a big household and you're not expected to leave the home right away. You're not, quote unquote, kicked out or need to leave. It's always a place you can return to. And so the value and importance of family and blood and community, it is so, so deeply entrenched within our culture. And the first thing that happened, and this was the most impactful experience for me, it brought me to my knees, was we drove all the way down to Mexico. We had taken him out of a psychiatric unit in the US in Houston, drove all the way to Mexico, get to Monterrey, get into the clinic. Immediately, 2 nurses come, rush to the car, grab him because they knew that there was some mania and psychosis still taking place, and grab him, take him into, behind doors, just like Gare, to get him stabilized. They let us know that he needs, to be sedated for a time, given that he's been so many hours in this exacerbated state. Out comes the lead psychiatrist from behind closed doors, just to the entryway, and greets us and says, "Hi, I'm Dr. Jose Castillo Ruiz. I'm going to be in charge of your brother, right, or your son. This is my clinic. Welcome." He says, "Welcome." And he says, "Step into my office. I'd like to talk to you." And
there, I just got chills. I mean,
I'm tearing
I can
up.
feel the love coming through and the compassion coming through.
It was the first time that I had seen a psychiatrist face to face that was responsible for my brother's life. Sorry. Wow.
That is everything. Sonia, that is everything. That is everything.
I mean, in all our years of trying to get him help, we had never seen from the psychiatrist. We had seen nurses, we had seen social workers, we had seen others responsible and under private practice. There was some exchange and interaction, but he sat us down and for 45 whole minutes, he told us he asked me, who's Robert Garcia? He just like said his name, and he wanted to understand what he had gone through and what he liked and what he disliked and what were his lived experiences. And I'd never had that before. So it just like brought us to our knees, and it was such a relief. I knew he was in good hands. You know, I knew there was someone there, a human that was caring for a human. And that was just all I was ever asking for and looking for. And it gave us so much peace. And it was day and night, you know, I can't stop crying. Sorry.
This is one of the most important experiences in his life and your life too, as family. Thank God, like he was able to find some place where he is seen as a person, as a whole person, not somebody who needs his med adherence plan adjusted.
It made all the difference. And so you bet your bottom dollar that's the kind of care and the compassion and the inclusion and the consideration that we're bringing to MI.
I love this conversation. Sonia Garcia from MI Health. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Definitely. Thank you for the time and the platform. It was such a pleasure.
Standing by. All right, everyone. I have another special guest in the studio today, live via Zoom, Chris Hoyd, Director of Product with Vinyl. Welcome to the program, Chris.
Thanks, Nicole. Happy to be here.
Well, that was a great presentation with Sonia Garcia. I really appreciated her honesty and, most importantly, her empathy. It's easy for someone like Sonia, who has direct experience with a loved one, a family member, who is suffering from mental illness. And there's another thing altogether when product folks don't have somebody at home who has the exact condition that you're trying to solve problems for. Can you talk to us a little bit about empathy and product management? How do you think about empathy in your day-to-day practice with your teams in terms of incorporating that in your day-to-day?
Sure. Yeah. And first off, that was an amazing conversation with Sonia and Nicole. Thanks for bringing that to the community. And on that point, I think it's not an understatement to say that empathy permeates everything we do in product. It's not just an attribute that we look for in new hires at Vinyl. It really is like a skill or an outlook that we emphasize and refine over time. It's that like combination of perceptiveness, imagination almost, analytical ability that like allows us to connect with the customer or the client or even other team members and translate that into products that, you know, maybe enable better care for patients or deliver programs for healthcare organizations that provide better customer experiences. And frankly, it's like also the self-awareness of recognizing when your own sense of empathy maybe isn't sufficient to drive to a really successful product, particularly in healthcare. And so you may need to not only talk directly with a customer or a patient, but maybe co-create a solution with them. So Sonia used the phrase culturally competent care, which I think is a really great way to put it. I think we're seeing more awareness of the value of that and realizing that it's not always enough to understand the patient journey, but to really embrace the context of a patient's sort of lived experience. And there may just not be a way to fully imagine that, but it does take empathy to realize that limitation and collaborate in the right way to bring to life a new product or service.
I also am reminded of part of the conversation from the first panel that you were moderating today, where someone mentioned having the ability to channel that feedback through unofficial channels rather than always have it be put through a survey process or something a little bit more rigorous. We talk about evidence-based solutions a lot in healthcare, and it's sometimes really important to listen to people who have a lived experience, even if they aren't an official expert in the area. If they aren't a member of the product team, maybe somebody knows someone who has that. Maybe they live with somebody who has that experience, right? All that is, I think, credible evidence for building in. I do think that there's something to be said for on the other hand, some institutions, for example, University of California, San Francisco, who we're about to hear from,
yep,
have they have a lot to say about when you're working with such complex solutions, you can't always wing it. And in fact, it takes years to go to market and all of that. So it's interesting that there's a place for product management, empathy and product management, no matter how you practice product management, but that it can be, I think, number one, what you were saying, it can be incorporated in many different touch points, and no matter who you are on the team. And number two, that product management has different techniques that you rely upon and expectations doing product in different organizations, right? So all that is to say, I'm really looking forward to our next conversation with University of California, San Francisco. They introduced themselves in the panel, but we have Sabrina Earlhoff, who is at UCSF, and her clinical partner, Dr. Elena Tsoi, PhD, also from UCSF. Before we cut to the next segment, I wanted to give a couple of reminders. If you're enjoying this program on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel. This really helps us deliver more features down the line. And also, when you subscribe, you'll get instant notifications when we do post new content, just like this presentation today. And snippets from our other conversations are available now. We also want to remind you that if you are not in the Slack channel, we have a good conversation going, and you're going to want to check that out. So if you are just seeing this, maybe you didn't even register for the program, but you registered for the October program last year, or our very first product and health tech presentation in June of 2021, you know how to get to the Slack group. Please join us there. You are warmly welcome, and we look forward to chatting with you there. So up next, I think that is my cue to say let's roll. Let's enjoy our conversation with Sabrina Earlhoff and Dr. Elena Tsoi at UCSF, and our very own Chris Hoyd from Vinyl. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We're very grateful to have you both here today, and very excited about this product, which is called TabCat. And maybe we can kick off by summarizing what this product is and what its goals are and what outcomes you're hoping to achieve from it. And maybe Sabrina, again, I'll start with you.
Sure. So TabCat stands for Tablet-Based Cognitive Assessment Tool. It's a software platform, again, developed by Dr. Kate Posehn here at UCSF for both research and clinical use. At its most basic, it's a tablet-based application that houses a variety of tests and questionnaires used to assess cognition. But it does go beyond that in its offerings of HIPAA-compliant data storage, robust scoring based on a well-characterized sample of research participants at the Memory and Aging Center and beyond, automated reporting that can be integrated into the electronic medical record, access to resources, portability. What am I missing, Elena?
I think you got it all. Very attractive user interface.
I hope so. Yeah, and our most popular set of tests on TabCat is called the TabCat Brain Health Assessment. We have widely studied the brain health assessment in its detection of neurodegenerative disorders like mild cognitive impairment and dementia. And maybe, Elena, you can talk more about our studies on the brain health assessment.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the interesting things about TabCat, which is, I think, why a lot of the team members that are involved in this work and sort of seeing the outside, because, we go to scientific conferences and we see there's a lot of products out there that sort of meant to measure cognitive health. I think one of the unique features of TabCat is the fact that it was, first of all, developed not by a company, but by a group of very excited neuropsychologists who recognize the need for digitalizing cognitive assessment. And I think one of the most exciting developments in the field of neuropsychology or cognitive health in general is the fact that we can now use machines to measure certain things that a human cannot measure. Things like reaction time are absolutely impossible to capture by a human examiner. And at the same time, those metrics tend to be the most sensitive or, the most useful for clinical conceptualization. So Sabrina mentioned, we developed batteries that are not just sort of, scientifically robust and have really good results, but are also very efficient for implementation in very, very busy clinical practices. We primarily work with our partners in primary care, where, as most people know, the time is so limited and every minute counts. So by developing a tool that doesn't require to be administered by a very busy doctor and can be done easily by medical staff like a medical assistant, and at the same time doesn't require all of that, kind of manual scoring and sort of trying to make sure that you're doing things right, and automatically scores everything and just shows you the results in electronic medical records, I think has been a game changer for us, as well as to our partners who we consistently hear, luckily for us, positive feedback from.
Very cool. That is super exciting to hear about. And you touched on something, Dr. Soy, that I want to kind of double click on. You sort of contrasted the setting in which you guys are building TabCat with maybe some of the other alternatives in the market, right? That might be, maybe they're funded by venture capital, maybe they're coming from more of the move fast and break things ethos. You guys are in more of a kind of an academic and research setting. Can you maybe talk a little bit about, maybe the pros and the cons of that distinction?
When we were starting to develop TabCat, I don't think even our team fully realized the extent to which we will be sort of spending a lot of, dollars, but also our own team's efforts, as well as, a lot of kind of supportive infrastructure for maintenance of a certain platform. I think this is something that we definitely had to learn. And this is something that a lot of academic settings, for example, are not used to, because I don't know if you're aware, but if you work in a sort of grant supported program, you kind of work from a grant to a grant. And so you kind of have this, continuation of support, but at the same time, you always have to be coming up with innovation. And I think as you're thinking about something like a platform that you want to have longevity, as well as continuous application, you really, really have to think deeply about how do you justify those costs. And so I think a part of what we have been doing is sort of, brainstorming different solutions in terms of making sure that we are supporting as many studies as possible and supporting as many providers as possible, at the same time making sure that we kind of balance out that ability to provide that high quality support, both technically and scientifically. So that's kind of the biggest con, I think, that I see. But in terms of pros, I think there's so many pros. The fact that TabCat can be used in both research and clinical care allows for a multitude of opportunities, to look at data longitudinally. We have all of these data sources that can be easily combined and then, can be turned into research questions, which can in turn be turned into policy and actually, making sure that people who are making decisions about healthcare recognize the importance as well as the added value of doing something like this in primary care. So I think, there are tons of pros, including, by no means it's not the smallest pro, but I think the ability for a lot of healthcare providers who might otherwise not be comfortable doing cognitive assessment, because a lot of cognitive assessment tools, even the most basic ones, require extensive training and require a lot of sort of interpretability. There's a lot of that ambiguity in terms of understanding, is this a normal response or abnormal, which puts a lot of strain on many healthcare teams. So I think the fact that this can all be digitized and, data can be collected in a high quality and high volume sort of fashion is extremely helpful.
So the academic setting is, and the nature of the funding and whatnot, is maybe just a little more conducive, comfortable even for someone with a very clinical focus, to make sure that all those things fall into place and there's not maybe an undue pressure to get something out the door before it's really ready for the audience. Interesting.
Correct. I think we can spend all the time in the world to make sure that our tool is as good as it can be. Absolutely.
Which is appropriate in this case. That's awesome. And Sabrina, I'm sure as someone who's, close to the developers, close to the designers, you probably have a slightly different perspective on this.
Yeah. And to add to what Dr. Soy said about, finding business partners who share our values in scientific rigor and understand our limitations as they relate to time and are willing to kind of guide us through what we believe is ethical and meaningful commercialization, I think has been a challenge for us. I think there's so many people out there that we can partner with, and finding somebody who fits exactly like a glove and exactly what we would want and can honor our product as much as we honor it has been a challenge, I would say. And in the academic setting, like any other product, we have to practice, perspective taking on a daily basis, right? We juggle the needs of the researchers, primary care providers, the medical staff who administer our tests, the patients, the caregivers, so many people. And what I think is really fascinating about our specialty is that our patients are not only elderly on the most part, which gives us a certain, set of challenges in UI and UX design, but they also may present with unique symptoms of neurocognitive disorders that can cause confusion, memory loss, difficulty understanding language, difficulty staying focused. The academic setting that we're in is very conducive to learning about these perspectives because we have such direct access to specialists in the field and, the firsthand experience with our wonderful, generous research participants that give their time to us. And I think it is a really critical and a big advantage in the space that we have is that we have access to this wonderful cohort of research participants to really inform our UI and UX design. And while we may not be very formal about that UX research, we have plenty of anecdotal and firsthand experience to work with.
Maybe with that as the backdrop, I'm curious if we can, circle back to like where the product is in its life cycle and what it's taken to get it this far. I think several years of clinical support is, kind of a little anomalous in the world of tech to really take the time to establish that foundation. So can you just describe what it looked like to get it to where it is now and what you think is sort of ahead of the product?
Let's see. We started building TabCat, I believe, in 2013 and didn't start contracting with software developers until 2015, I believe. So from that period, we were really just like, taking shots in the dark, I think, with how we wanted to design these tests. But we were working hard to, as Elena mentioned, bring together this vision of having a brief assessment to detect cognitive impairment. And we started designing these novel tests during that time. Once we programmed them into a cohesive software platform, we probably started collecting data specifically on these tests and their efficacy in detecting and diagnosing cognitive impairment for at least 3 years, maybe 4 years. And it wasn't until 2018 that we published our very first validation study showing that these novel tests that we created were reliable and valid at detecting and diagnosing neurocognitive disorders. So on the question of timelines, we do move very slowly in the research field, but that first validation paper was absolutely critical to getting our foot in the door and showing primary care providers, potential partners, how valuable our tool could be. From there, we've done tons of focus groups. We've organized people from all different nations and backgrounds to inform and iterate on these tests, on the user experience of the platform itself, and of course, work also in the space of integrating into the electronic medical record. And this has been another crucial step in making our product really usable in primary care practice. I think we probably are all familiar with the limitations of primary care practice and integrating products into their workflow, and having one single set of results or report integrated directly into the EMR was totally crucial in our development. From there, we're working on implementing in even more primary care practices outside of UCSF, and doing some big research studies in implementation there, and hopefully looking at time and cost analyses as well, to measure the real life impact that our tests can have on primary care, and of course, care guidance following.
Incredibly methodical, rigorous, I would say very empathetic for an extended period to all the various stakeholders that need to be listened to and accounted for. I think it's a pretty incredible effort. Has it felt slow to you, Dr. Soy, or does it feel like about the right pace?
No, I think it's, I actually think it's going pretty fast compared to other academic research. It usually takes us on average about 10 years to answer a single question. No, I think as Sabrina mentioned, one of the things that has been sort of very eye-opening for us is kind of seeing the real world impact of this product so soon. I think it's very rare in our field where, we tend to answer these sort of, difficult, deep scientific questions. And then, it takes years to collect data to answer them. And then it takes even more years to then try and make sense of what this means and how does this actually change healthcare. I think with TabCat, at least in my experience, the fact that we sort of went from, the idea, the dream of having something so quick and simple. And, there were all of these like EMR integration wasn't even on the table early on because, we didn't even think that we would get there. And the fact that we did, I think again, forgive my academic timeline, but in a relatively short period of time, I think is very exciting because we can see the real world impact and we see patients have undergone this assessment in our own clinic. And it's just, I think it's really fascinating to see that we are making a difference in real time.
So that's, a lot of positivity. We're at a great place, right? This has gone largely very well, I think, over the last several years. But let's talk about some challenges or some of the low points. Are there any points where you guys maybe weren't sure if this was like actually going to be clinically effective, or you weren't sure if it was going to get funded for the next version, or any frustrations or worries along those lines over the years?
To have real impact, you have to nudge your way into a clinical workflow, and there's tons of stuff there that gets in the way. I think one of the things on the tech side that we deal with the most are the limitations of the electronic medical records themselves. There are, I don't know, maybe 15 to 20 different vendors of electronic medical records. Within that, you may have a hospital that's using more than one for each, department that they work in. And on top of that, each hospital or clinical space will be using their own specific instance of an electronic medical record. So any integration work is really done like on a case-by-case basis, unless you really get picked up by the vendor itself and, are integrating directly with the vendor. So the scalability of EMR integration for us has been a real challenge, I would say. I think the technical aspects, the actual pieces of hooking the EMR up to TabCat is not that difficult, but finding the champions who can provide the technical expertise at the clinic or the hospital that we're working with is very challenging. We may be working with one provider who's so excited to use TabCat and really wants it to be a part of the medical record, but they have no idea who to turn to get that technical skill set in there to actually integrate TabCat. And so that kind of scalability is a pretty big challenge, I would say, moving forward and thinking bigger picture about the future of TabCat. Just off the top of my head, too, that maybe Dr. Soy can touch on, besides the primary care integration, is maybe our work in being inclusive towards patients from diverse backgrounds. It's not so much of a technical problem, but we do run into issues of UI and UX design and our analysis of data in thinking about patients from different cultural backgrounds, different levels of socioeconomic status, you name it. So that has been a really interesting discovery along the way. One example I can think of is in some cultures, we've learned that thoroughness and accuracy is valued over speed. And so in our tests of executive function, where speed is really the primary performance metric, we have real differences in how we need to approach the instructions for the tests that are given to the patient, the analysis of their performance. And so, these big dreams that we have of having big scale EMR and, tests that are widely used by anybody on the planet, these big dreams lead to big problems. And we're lucky and fortunate to have tons of international partners thinking about this with us, but it is a big challenge that we face.
Totally agree. I think the only thing I could mention is if I had to sort of put all of the potential difficulties that we run into in terms of developing this project and making sure that it works, again, in intended clinical settings, is this balance between how much guideline or directive we provide versus how much flexibility we allow. It has a lot to do with, with what Sabrina was talking about with electronic medical records. But I think at the same time, I think it applies to any healthcare product you develop. You don't just develop a product, you have to develop a whole pipeline, the entire workflow in which you want this product to work, So just an example of TapCat, we had to think about who would be actually administering it. If we want to save the primary care physician's time, then who would it be? Would it be a nurse? Would it be a social worker? Would it be a medical assistant? Every clinic has their own set of sort of this medical staff, so you have to think about who that is going to be. Do we want those people to be bilingual? And if we are, what languages would they be supporting, And if this is to be done, it has to be done in a separate room, or does it? Can the caregiver be present or not? All of these different aspects, I think, of kind of figuring out the logistics so that when you actually partner with someone, again, you were able to provide this high quality support to ensure that you're not just giving them the tool and letting them run with it, kind of, which they eventually will run into a wall with. So you want to make sure that you provide them with all of these considerations and guidelines and directives, which again, have to be almost tailored to every single healthcare system and setting in which we're working.
You kind of touched on this a little bit, but providers, they really lack support and resources they need to actually deliver care following a diagnosis. So we can tell the provider, your patient has a high likelihood of cognitive impairment, but what happens next? And I think our mission is to really impact not only the provider actions, but the care of the patient and the caregiver. And so we really work hard to provide kind of turnkey recommendations that can be integrated and given to the patient and their families, following diagnosis. And this has to be done in a way that is informative, but not alarming to the patient. So being very thorough in the resources that we give, these resources need to be, specific to the area, specific to the culture, the language spoken. It is just unbelievable how much, we want to give and how difficult it can be. So it really is totally essential to look beyond that final step of diagnosis and think about the care that follows.
So nuanced, so complex, so thoughtful. I think it's really cool to hear all this. This was a huge privilege for me. So thank you both for your time, and really appreciate contributing to the product and health tech community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's such a delight to talk to you.
Welcome back, everybody. Nicole Harris-Roberts, your MC today for Product and Health Tech Go Beyond. So I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed that conversation with Sabrina and Dr. Zoe, but it's making me a little bit hungry. I don't know why. I think it's because I'm looking forward to our next segment. And for those of you who attended our June event last year, we did something a little bit different where we had a conversation with Killer Creamery and some of you got ice cream and that was really fun. Well, this time we're mixing it up in a different way. We sat down with Allison Corona. She is the founder of Chicana Foods. And little did we know when we were preparing this presentation today that this would air during Hispanic Heritage Month, but that's a nice tie-in as well. We are going to I had the opportunity to sit down with Allison and talk about her perspectives about product management and starting her company. So we'll get to that in a moment. Before we do that, I want to make a couple more announcements and shout outs. First of all, thank you to Vinyl for sponsoring this and producing this event today. Thank you to Mark Doubleday, content lead, who is behind every HDMI cable that is connected to every piece of equipment that is required to bring this to all of you this afternoon. We really appreciate it. And for those of you who are just tuning in, we do have live networking coming up shortly. So at 4:45 Pacific, 7:45 Eastern, we will be live in a Zoom meeting where you can join us virtually, open up a ginger ale if that's your drink of choice, and have a conversation with those of you who are also in the Zoom room. We are standing by, we will be standing by at 4:45 p.m. Pacific to be letting you into that Zoom room if you registered to attend this event. We sent that link out early this morning. Please check your email inbox. If you're not getting it, please send us a message in the Slack channel, or you can email us at info@productandhealthtech.com and get that link to that, that Zoom meeting for 4:45 p.m. today. Second thing I want to mention is if you are loving this content, you can hear even more of it on our podcast. Each and every one of these presentations was edited today so that you could get a snappy, breezy look at what people have to say, tell their stories, hear what they have, hear their stories. But there is more behind the scenes. Not only behind the scenes, but there were some perspectives that we didn't have time to share during this live stream today, but you are going to want to check it out. And the way you find it, and not now because we don't have it yet live, but it will be live very soon on two places. Number one is our podcast. So we do have a podcast at Product and Health Tech. You will find it through Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Just search for Product and Health Tech and it will come right up. We're the only one out there. So we hope you will view that podcast, like and subscribe to that podcast so you can get a notification when we do update that with new episodes. You can also view those episodes through YouTube. So go to our YouTube channel, again, Product and Health Tech, and we have curated lists that showcase all of our content from all of our amazing speakers that we've ever had, plus our podcast guests. Now, you may be thinking, what about my story? What about my company? What about my team? I really want to share what they're doing with the world and get feedback from the Product and Health Tech community. Well, you can. How do you do that? Email us at info@productandhealthtech.com, or you can send us, again, a message in Slack, or you can find us on LinkedIn. Reach out to us and we will get back to you and invite you to have a conversation with us, and we can put together a presentation. We can showcase your case study if you have one. We can talk about your team and your accomplishments. We can talk about the challenges that we've all had, right? Building products in this difficult, highly regulated industry. So if you yourself would like to be a guest on our show, either the podcast or one of our presentations like today, please do reach out, info@productandhealthtech.com. And finally, do follow us on LinkedIn. So I know we sent out the All Points Bulletin a few months ago now, and asked people to like and subscribe to our LinkedIn channel. Please do that. So on LinkedIn, again, you will find us very easily at Product and Health Tech. In fact, some of you may be viewing this live stream through LinkedIn. What's great about this is that once we get to 1,000 subscribers, we can deliver the content in new ways that are easier to access for you. So I know everybody's busy out there and everybody has their own opinions about social media, but in this case, it really does help us connect and collaborate with one another. So we do encourage you to subscribe to our LinkedIn channel. We're looking for 1,000 subscribers. Right now we have fewer than 200. And I know there are more than 200 of you out there who have joined the community. So please do subscribe to our LinkedIn channel. And with that, I think we're ready for our next segment. I don't know about you. I'm ready. So here is a conversation that I had with Allison Corona, founder of Chicana Foods. Let's take a listen.
How did you decide to start? Like, tell us your story. I mean, people know you now as the founder of Chicana Foods, and you do this food crafting, and you're starting this new business, and you're an entrepreneur, but you didn't always do this. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I actually studied fine art in college. I got a degree in fine art with an emphasis in photography, and I was doing photography professionally for 8 years. The pandemic had a lot to do with it, events surrounding, just feeling like I needed to do something different. I ended up taking a class on like launching your own business or something like that. I don't even remember what it was called, but part of the class was like, okay, create a product and we'll go through all the steps of what it takes to do that. And I chose salsa as my product, partly because salsa is like part of my heritage. So my family in Mexico has their own salsa company, and this is what they do for a living. And salsa macha was just one of the salsas that they sell, and I figured I would start there. So that's kind of like why I chose salsa. But then the rest of it is just like I just was in a spot where I wanted to do something different. I wanted to make a difference, and I saw this as an opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. So how did you decide? I mean, it was easy to decide on salsa because it's been part of your family and part of that culture.
Yeah.
But how did you, what were some surprising things that you learned in your product classes in terms of just taking a step back and thinking about, I mean, when the world is your oyster, when you can design literally any product you want, talk to me about that process and how you kind of thought through deciding on what product to kind of build or kind of make.
Yeah, so I specifically remember choosing this style of salsa because I felt like it was so different than what people are so used to. Like the tomato-based fresh salsa is what people think of when they think of salsa. And salsa matcha is not new. I want to make that clear. It's not something that we invented. It's been around, but definitely it's not a product that U.S. consumers are used to, and so I felt like we could get pretty good traction with it.
How do you educate people about what salsa matcha is? I mean, this is it's not new to the world. People have been making salsa matcha in Mexico for a long time, right?
Yes.
For generations.
Yes.
And yet, I'll say for me, I had never heard of it before. So how do you explain what it is to people who have never heard of salsa matcha, who are thinking chips and salsa and,
Yeah, so I usually tell people it's a chili oil based salsa. It's similar to like an Asian chili crunch or chili oil, but with Mexican ingredients or Mexican flavor. So then I just go into like some of the ingredients that go into it. So it's olive oil based. It's got dried chilies, seeds, and garlic, and all of that is like just adds so much texture to your foods. And I also explain that like it's not like tomato-based salsa that you can just like dip your chips into. It's more like a topping. You pour it on drizzle it on your food. So on your eggs in the morning or even in salads. Like there's so many applications for it that go way beyond just chips.
Well, hopefully for those of you who decided to get a snack box, I hope you can get your snack boxes ready because we are going to be able to taste those together. And who knows, I bet for some people who've already received their boxes that they already have opinions because they've already opened it up. Like, please don't wait. I'm sure you haven't waited until this moment, but for those who have waited, you're about to see something different. Talk to me a little bit about your photography background. How is it that one of the things that we experience in health tech and in product in general is sort of cross training? We talk a lot about teams or individuals on the teams being, having depth and or breadth, or being T-shaped, people who are sort of have a broad range of expertise who can, maybe they code and they also can do product management, and maybe they have some design background, but they're really deep in their technical chops are the strongest part of what they do. Talk to me about how you bring in kind of that design sensibility into your product and your company.
Yeah, so one of the major strengths that I feel like our company has is that I do have that photography background, and being able to photograph our product on, all these different foods that I just mentioned is super beneficial because, again, since people aren't familiar with how to use it, I can, photograph all the many different ways that you can use it and show that off. And I've had a lot of feedback from people at the markets say that, that they love that I show them how to use it. Visually being able to see, oh yeah, that would be great on ice cream, or yeah, that would be great on a bagel. They never would have tried it if they hadn't seen it and been like, yeah, that does look good, or that does sound good.
So being able to visualize what the product is, and that's something that people who work in tech sometimes have a hard time with. I mean, especially at first, but painting that picture is really important. Who is your target market? Like, who is your ideal customer?
Sure. So the ideal customer is the foodie, someone who loves to explore different flavors from different cultures, who is maybe a little more adventurous.
So for this ideal customer, do you find what kind of channels do you think work best? Are you finding work best to reach out to this foodie? Because, I mean, for better or worse, we have an abundance of choice, particularly those who live in anywhere which has a gourmet market, or even a decent grocery store now. It's amazing over the past 10 years how the selection available in stores throughout the country and throughout the world really has improved and diversified. But how do people, what do you find is the best way for, like, how are these foodies finding you? Is my, I guess, the short question. How are the foodies finding you?
We literally only sell within Idaho, and then those people from Idaho are sharing it with their family outside of Idaho. And so right now it's basically just word of mouth. People who are trying it at the markets and, loving it, and then sharing it with, their loved ones. We've had several people come tell us, oh, I sent it to my family in Ohio. And then like 2 weeks later, we get orders from somebody in Ohio. But to your previous question, I think the best place for us to sell would be like co-ops and gourmet, like boutique stores. I think large grocery chains right now, in all the different states, like it would just be too much right now.
I would love to see almost a walkthrough of the salsa matcha on your website or on social media that tells people it, like you have like that you really makes people feel it, so that they know what it is. Because I agree with you, having people be immersed in it is something that you kind of have to taste it to know what it's all about, right?
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
But if you could like see it, then maybe I mean, this is, I think, a challenge that health tech professionals encounter all the time, because some of these are abstract thoughts or new concepts of, and how do you explain, how this works when nobody's ever seen it before, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna help each other out. This is what we're all about at Product and Health Tech, helping each other find those resources, because with small businesses or small teams, you don't have a team of 40 people or regional sales team you can go and fan out across the country, right? You have to be a little scrappier, a little more selective about where you're doing those taste tests and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah. Do you have any what kind of new products do you see on your roadmap for the next year or so?
You know what, honestly, I feel like there's so much potential with just with salsa matcha that I think we're going to stick with just a line of really, can I say kick-ass? A real good...
You could say kick-ass.
With a real good
Hell yeah,
lineup.
you could say kick-ass.
A real kick-ass lineup of tasty salsa matcha.
Allison Corona, founder of Chicana Foods, thank you so much for joining us at Product and Health Tech.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, everybody, that almost wraps it up for us today at Product and Health Tech. But before we leave, I wanted to give a couple of more thank yous. Thank you to Vinyl for sponsoring and producing this content today. Thank you to each and every one of our guest speakers who donated their time to bring you their stories to the community. Thank you so much, and we hope to do it again with you soon. Speaking of which, if you have a story that you'd like to tell from your team or from your company, or just want to connect with others in the Product and Health Tech community, please do reach out to us at info@productandhealthtech.com, and we will get back to you, and we should definitely have a conversation about having you on a podcast episode or at one of our special events such as this. Also want to repeat, for those of you who missed it, that Product and Health Tech will be at Health 2022. That is happening November 13th to 16th in Las Vegas, Nevada this year, in I think it's 6 or 8 short weeks from now. So for those of you who are going, let us know you're coming so that we can connect with you. It's been too long since we've been able to hang out with people in person, safely and socially distanced, of course, with masks as appropriate. We are health tech after all. But now, without further ado, it's time for snacks, y'all. We have in front of me our delicious salsa matcha, courtesy of Chicana Foods. Thank you again, Allison Corona, for sharing your perspective and for sending us all a jar of salsa. Now, this is not salsa the way you think of chips and salsa. I've heard a couple of taste test notes. Somebody in the community mentioned that this tastes delicious with fresh apples or pears. You might want to check that out. I mean, with the chili oil and the salt and the crunch of the peanuts, it could be very interesting. We also threw in a couple other snacks for you because I don't know about you, but at the end of a long work day, I like to get my snack on. We hope you enjoy it. If you enjoyed it, if you have feedback for us about the snacks or about the content that we provided today, please let us know. Send us a chat in Slack. Send us an email. We definitely want to hear from you. This is not a one-way conversation. We are a community together, so share your feedback with us. So, just checking my watch here, at 4:45, we're going to start live networking. And what that means is that we will transition from this live stream here and we will go into Zoom. So for those of you who registered for the event in advance, and for those of you who just signed up as of a couple of minutes ago, I sent out the Zoom link early this morning and just now to those who registered within the past couple of hours. please do join us in Zoom. Our team is waiting to welcome you, and we look forward to seeing you there. That kicks off officially at 4:45. So whether you got a jar of salsa or want to be eating on camera or not eating on camera or not, don't worry. It's really not about the snacks. It's really about getting to know each other. In fact, at our last live networking event, one of our guest speakers who we heard from today, Sonia Garcia at My Health, it was our first opportunity to meet her. So that was pretty neat. It's usually it's kind of a smaller group that gets together, and then if it becomes sort of a larger group, we use breakout sessions so that you can get to know each other individually. I know for some of you, the introverts out there, maybe you're thinking, it's not really for me. Don't worry, we take all kinds in the Zoom meeting. You don't have to be a mega introvert to enjoy live networking in Zoom. There's no networking roulette or anything like that where we randomly pair you with people one-on-one or anything like that. It's not speed dating. Just networking with our Pride in Health Tech community. So we hope you will come. Our team is there, and if you knock on that door, we'll be able to admit you into the room at 4:45 and get started. So, a couple other announcements. This content that we provided today will be available on our YouTube channel. So most of you are, in fact, probably all of you are viewing this content through our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to that channel, will you? That's the best way to get the content after the fact. We will have this live stream available, just like the last two live streams, shortly after the presentation ends today. We will also have snippets, not outtakes, maybe some outtakes. Probably not very, okay, all right, Mark is nodding. Probably some outtakes, but we like to keep it professional here at Product and Health Tech, and we have snippets, so if you have only 1 minute or 3 minutes to listen to what is the pearl of wisdom from one of the presentations that you maybe didn't have a chance to view the whole thing today, do check out our YouTube channel. We'll have all of those snippets available. You can search by date. We have playlists that we create so that you can find it easily. The other thing we have on there is our podcast episodes. So, as I mentioned before, we have a podcast now. You can find it on Apple or Spotify podcasts. And the reason we chose those is because we asked you and you responded that those are the primary ways that you enjoy your podcast. I know I'm a Spotify podcast kind of person. So it's easy to find us. We're Product and Health Tech on Spotify or Apple. You'll find us right away. And this all the presentations that you heard today will be available through that podcast. Also, most of them are even lengthier on the podcast. You know, when you're listening to a podcast, it's different than this live stream, right? It's different. You're maybe getting ready to make your dinner for the evening, or taking your dog for a walk, or going out for a quick stretch break. We find that, and what we told us is that longer form content is a little bit easier on the podcast. So, for example, the conversation we had with My Health today, she had a lot more to say, and that is all available, or will be shortly, on the podcast, okay? So definitely check us out on the podcast. Let's see, so quick time check, 4:42, we just have a few more minutes before our live networking Zoom starts. I know I'm looking forward to seeing all of you guys on the Zoom. I'm sure if you liked the snacks, if you liked the stickers, by the way, for those of you who said no to the snacks, kind of missed out on the stickers, unfortunately. But hey, if you want a set of stickers, please send us a message and we'll get those out to you right away. I was going to mention who produced these, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to get in trouble with sponsors. But we do have some stickers. They're kind of fun. You know, put them on your water bottle, stick them on your notebook. I'm going to stick mine in my notebook just for fun. And I doubt that many of you waited to open up some of your snacks. I heard from one person that these peanut butter bites apparently are amazing. This one says, "You are what you share." So nice sentiment. I think we're going to wrap it up here, guys. Please join us in Zoom. Click on the, we're not sharing the link here in the live stream, but go to Slack, go to your email inbox, find that link to the Zoom, and please join us. We look forward to seeing you there. I'm going to pour myself a caffeine-free, sugar-free ginger ale because, again, this is Product and Health Tech, and we like to keep it healthy. And cheers. And we'll see you next time at Product and Health Tech. Thanks so much.